Computer. Yep. Computer. Yeah, 3 people are already waiting, but okay, start video. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself. So weird. Okay, Patrick Campbell, Michelle Garofalo are in. Hello, everyone. I'll just keep entering, admitting people.
Yep, I'll be just off mic for till we start.
There. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Morning, Patty. Morning, Bob.
How are you? How are you, Pat?
I'm good. You?
Good. Good. And Bob, we can hear you, no problem.
Okay, good.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I'll just keep admitting people as we come in.
Yep.
So I'm just going to mute myself for a few minutes.
Me too. I'm going to go
We'll
hide.
get started and awesome. Okay, thank you.
Morning, everybody. Or afternoon, I guess it is, isn't it?
Morning, Patrick.
Hello.
Gang.
Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Hey, Judy.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Could do a duet.
Whatever you like.
Yeah.
We could get Bob singing maybe.
Yeah.
No, but I'll play my mandolin. I got it here.
Yeah.
Good morning, the best to you each morning.
Wasn't that music
That's
for
good.
an ad for some product that I
Yeah.
can't remember what the product?
Kello, double good, Kellogg's best to you.
I
No,
think
that wasn't
Metro
it.
Morning had something like that as well, right? Metro Morning? I don't know.
That's an aging thing. That's an old commercial.
That's Trump's victory song.
Oh,
Oh,
he hasn't
don't go
won
there.
yet, has he?
Oh, man.
I stayed up too late watching it and it was going nowhere. I decided enough already.
Just shows you how split the United States actually is, you know.
You know, it is really sad. It was such a wonderful, great country to have two people running that are not representative of the wholesome strength of that country.
Nope.
I couldn't
Both
believe
my-
that the number of votes cast, that it's still so close. You know?
Well, even when he said this morning that he was going not consider the votes not counted last night to be part of the process. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, that's just
I don't think he can do that.
no.
That's completely well, it's against all constitutions, no matter what country you are, unless it's, you know, one that's under a dictatorship or something. But
I think that's what he wants is a dictatorship.
I'm not going to weigh in on the election. We had that discussion earlier with the prime minister and so on, because it's, you know, all you need is a little funny quote that creates an international
Exactly.
diplomacy problem. But I will say this: the polling is ridiculous. The
Yeah.
polling didn't have a clue of what was going on. And
Yeah.
I even experienced it in my own election where it was the prediction on the eve of the 2019 federal was the NDP was going to win by 38 to 27. And I won by 36 to 31 a percentage of the vote. And they were just completely off. But the funny part about it is that we knew that. We never worried about what the pollsters were saying. So I think the whole science of polling has got to look at itself seriously. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
I think it depends on who does the poll too. You know,
Well, there was a lot of discussion about that this morning relative to who responds to requests for information from polling organizations and how
Mhm.
legitimate that response is, because the people who are passionate may not respond. And as you all know, how many darn calls do we get or emails or text messages a day? Please, give me your thoughts on this, that, and the other. And how many of them do you actually respond to? Goose egg.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
that
so
too,
is-
and you know, like I read an article that says people lie to their doctor, they lie to their priest, they lie to this about lie, you know. So why are they going to tell the truth to some pollster, right?
Yep, they lie to their wives too, I hate to say.
Yeah, everybody.
But we
Yeah,
won't go
it's-
there.
No, that's good. That's somewhere you don't want to go. Religion and politics is your own business. But
What astounded me was that half the population, with all that vote counting, there were so many people that voted. I mean, it's historical. And so half of America still voted for this guy. It just astounds me.
well, you know, the scary part is though that I was listening to one of the senators, and he said that they had National Guard military police on standby just in case. You know,
Yeah.
that's unbelievable. You know that.
Peter, they haven't opened countless millions of those votes yet.
No,
I know.
no, they haven't.
know.
And Trump wants to stop it because I think he
Yeah.
knows. But you know, I don't think he
I
can.
like that positive attitude, Judy, because
Yeah.
Well,
you gotta say that. That's for sure.
yeah.
But
Well,
then if,
this is a good opportunity for our Canadian government to show their leadership and how we manage Canada. Because you guys
Well,
are doing an amazing
know,
job.
when you listen to our governments, and no matter what stripe it is, it's totally different. It's completely different. It's not the rhetoric that you listen to. Everybody everybody is wrong about certain things, but for the most part, our governments have done a really good job as far as I'm concerned, and yeah, we're not anywhere close to where they are in the United States, not even close, so that says a lot. Mind you, we're a smaller country, but it is what it is, I guess.
Well,
A larger
the
country,
one,
just a smaller population, and we have to carry a big shovel.
yeah, the one thing that I think the pandemic showed is the frailty of the American healthcare system, because they spend way more money than anybody on healthcare, and they've got a very poor result compared to us. And they're always lobbying things to the socialist healthcare. And ours is far from perfect, but boy, when we see what's happening there, that should raise a lot of questions over the next little while, because I never heard of anything from either one of them that said how they were going to fix healthcare.
Well, I've heard people, and I don't know how it is now because they have Obamacare, which is, if Trump gets in, probably going to be a thing of the past. But they say if you get cancer in some parts of the states, you may as well declare bankruptcy, because you'll run out of money before you get your health back in shape in some cases. So
a friend of mine from Hamilton went to Canton, Ohio, where he became vice president of human resources of Hoover. If you remember, Hoover used to be in Hamilton down by, you could see the sign at the football stadium, the big Hoover. But anyway, he ended up there, and although he's still a Canadian, is a very Americanized Canadian. And so when we had a conversation, and I suggested that 66% of bankruptcies in America are because of health care, medical bills, he got enraged. Because because he's got a plan. I guess the Hoover people, they have a plan. So the ones who have a plan are okay. But guess what? How many millions?
Everybody does. I was talking to some folks from New York City, and when we were down in the States, and me and my wife, and they said that their health care was like $1,500 a piece, and that they were retiring, and they were going to have to move to North Carolina, sell their house in New York City in order to afford their health care. So, that's
whatever you want.
Well, I have two brothers in the States, so.
But
Okay,
if you have
so
go ahead.
maybe we should get started, Bob, if that would be okay.
That would be okay. Go ahead, start, and then throw it to me or
Okay.
whatever you want to do.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hello, I'm Patty Hall, Executive Director of the Stony Creek Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to attend our virtual post-throne speech with MP Bob Bratina. As you know, Bob served on Hamilton Council from 2004 to 2010, and he was the former mayor of Hamilton. And he's been serving as the Liberal MP for Hamilton East Stony Creek since 2015. We previously ran a town hall with Bob in June, and we reviewed many of the government programs that were offered to help our businesses. So this follows as an update, particularly in light of the throne speech in September, where a greater focus was put on the pandemic recovery plan. A couple housekeeping items. We'll have everyone muted soon. And we've prepared some questions ahead of time. So if there's any questions, please log them in the message area and I'll try to look at them. And we will monitor them. If we have time at the end, we will open for a couple questions. I want to thank our sponsors for today's event, McHugh Whitmore, LLP, BDC, Meridian Credit Union, and TerraPure. Also like to give a huge thank you to MP Bob Bratina for agreeing again to talk to our membership today. We really appreciate it. Again, when this pandemic broke, the collaboration and the coordination and actions of all levels of government, including the governing parties and opposition, and the business community, was unprecedented. The federal government's work to get money in the hands of Canadians to sustain them and keep the economy growing. And even with the financial support from the government programs, there continues to be great concerns for citizens and businesses on financial stability, particularly with fears of a second wave of this pandemic. The Stony Creek Chamber had to, like all businesses, pivot. For us, our normal response to support local business changed. We canceled our scheduled events and we increased our interactions with all levels of government and immediately transitioned full steam into aggregating all the information from all levels of government and updating our website to provide this vital information to our membership. As we are a nonprofit who supports local business, from the beginning, it was important that we got on the front line of this crisis to support our members and our community. So on stonycreekchamber.com, if you want to follow some information there, you just click on the yellow box where it says COVID-19 vital information. And we've got a bunch of information there on from all levels of government, updates, health information, business continuity and recovery information, and some sector specific help. With the recent throne speech in September, the government pledged to press on against this pandemic, guided by science until a vaccine is available. In addition, in early October, there were announcements from the government on some new targeted support, strengthened programs, and expanded eligibility to help businesses. So let's get started. And again, Bob, thank you very much for being here with us today. And maybe you can give us an overview. Thank you.
Well, there we go. Thanks so much. I'm here in part because of the throne speech, because what we had anticipated coming into the next session of Parliament was maybe a better sense of the economic recovery plan. And that's not really been put on hold. There's a lot of work being done on that. But what was pretty obvious to everybody was there are a lot of people hurting, and we're a long way from getting out of the problems that began with the lockdowns in March, April, and we know all about that, about football, restaurants, you name it. It's just touched every aspect of our economy. Hamilton's economy has remarkably hanging in there, and a lot of that has to do with our Hamilton East Stony Creek Manufacturing Center, which begins with ArcelorMittal Dofasco, the National Steel Car, which is a very large employer, over 2,000 employees, and then all of the machine shops and so on. So there's still activity that's going on. And there are other parts of the country where, when I'm talking to my colleagues in the Liberal caucus from all over Canada, there's real suffering, and you can just, you can see what's happening on the East Coast. Anything that's got to do with tourism is a disaster. I heard Goody Hutchings, who's one of the MPs from Newfoundland and Labrador, who's a good friend of our bishop, by the way, Bishop Crosby, because he was a bishop in that part of the world. Grossmorn National Park is near her riding. You probably have heard of that. And last year they had 250,000 registered visitors. And this year they had 7,000 registered visitors. And that's just a reflection. You can extrapolate from that how serious those problems are. But going back to my statement, what we realized was that we had to keep people not really whole, because we can't quite do that, but as close to whole as possible with all of the costs that the pandemic has created for people and all of the economic problems. And so we've done a lot. And I will say this, one of my best friends in Hamilton East Stony Creek is a businessman who really doesn't love my party, but we get along well because I spent a lot of time in his establishment. And he said, I got to tell you, your guy, meaning the Prime Minister, has done a good job because the programs have been keeping me in business. And I've heard that from a lot of people. And so those programs have even been revitalized and reviewed and rehashed through the new throne speech that we discussed, because the rent relief bill was not satisfactory the last go around, as most of you are well aware. And so that has been reestablished. The new Canadian emergency rent subsidy is what we're talking about. And then the small medium enterprise program announcement. So I think you get the general picture that what we've been trying to do is go after the very special needs to keep people as close to whole as we can. And as of June the 28th, these are the numbers that I was able to pull for you. The CERB has provided support to 8.16 million individuals. The emergency wage subsidy has supported about 3 million employees. About 3.7 million families have benefited from the special one-time top-up of the Canada Child Benefit of $300. 12 million low and modest income individuals and families have received a special one-time payment through the GST credit. And on average, single adults receive 400 in additional benefits. Over 1.4 billion to over 600,000 students, and 6.7 million seniors are receiving a one-time tax-free payment of $300. And there are others who are eligible for the GIS who will also receive an additional $200. So that's a lot of money going out. And once again, it's not perfect. Nothing ever will be, but I think we're pretty proud of the fact that people have been able to keep their heads near or slightly above water because of the programs that we've rolled out. The final thing I'll say, and then I really want to hear your feedback, is my staff has been incredible. We have had our office open every day all through the pandemic, except for weekends and holidays. A couple of people made sort of smart alecky remarks when I was out somewhere. Oh, missing in action. No, my office is open every day. Oh, busman's holiday. No. Well, what are you doing in here? Well, I'm on my lunch hour. Because people really, we're close to people coming in, so it doesn't seem like we're very active. But even to the point where Service Canada is shuffling off issues, and I'm sure they're very much overworked, that ends up in our people's desks and files. And what that means in many cases is very upset people, often in tears, over issues about payments, about immigration situations, and so on. So it's not an easy world for our staff, and I want to thank them very much, as well as our host today, because Patty has been doing a yeoman's work in keeping you as chamber people well informed of everything that's going on. And I really appreciate the website, Patty, and all that you do. So let me leave that as opening remarks and hear back from the folks here. Patty?
Okay, perfect. So we have compiled some questions. So maybe if we could go into some of those, and then at the end, if there are any questions, we can open them up to the group here.
Yeah, sure.
So the first question, at the beginning of this pandemic, the federal government stepped in and provided vital financial support to citizens and businesses. Many programs have been extended and fine-tuned, thankfully. However, some feedback is unfortunately the refinement of some programs came too late for many businesses. For example, the rent subsidy program was an area of great concern, as you mentioned. Although 120,000 businesses were helped across the country, the original layout of that program clearly did not help many businesses survive, some even locally. Do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, well, the first and obvious thing was, and it's not passing the buck, it's that the regulation falls under provincial jurisdiction. So, and believe me, and you may have seen or heard of a lot of issues of provincial premiers being upset with the Prime Minister as, you know, weighing in on issues that belong in fact to them. So the setup of the program was difficult because of that. It didn't work all that well. And the other issue, of course, was that the landlords, I had one particular individual who was an older fellow who had an apartment building, a small apartment downtown with a storefront. And he didn't have the wherewithal, the skills. He's a man in his 80s who had a tenant downstairs. And he needed help to actually fill out all the applications and never got to that point. So he just waived the rent, but he was able to do that. So I hear that, and that's the reason that we've turned it around, listened very carefully. And we did that too with the tax reform. Remember, we had a big town hall here 3 years ago and took your advice. So that would be my comment on that, that the initial problem was the problem of jurisdictions.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Many others are still struggling to find a clear roadway to recovery. They have restarted their businesses, and now with some increasing case numbers, the potential for some businesses to shut down again is on everyone's mind. There's a real fear that many businesses would not survive a second shutdown. They've dipped into their savings, run up credit cards, remortgaged their homes and businesses. There's a potential many others will not make it over the long term. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's the raging conversation, and it certainly had a lot to do with our friends in the South over the past few months, because what do you do? And so the position that most of us have put ourselves in, including the federal government, is listen to the experts. And I think that if you really did a survey of all the experts, you would find differences in the approach that they feel we should be taking. So in terms of full lockdowns, I'll give you a personal take on it. I don't know how you can just shut the economy completely down. I don't know that. The other thing is, are we listening to the news media, getting information that's useful to us as opposed to sensational news data such as the number of new deaths, the number of new cases? Because we should also be concerned about what I would call the morbidity rate. How sick are people getting when they get COVID? And, when they talk about the mortality rate, it seems to fall for the most part within the normal mortality rate of Canadians. For instance, the lifespan of Canadians is 82 years of age, something in around there. For men and women, it's between 80 and 82. And that also happens to be the age range in which people seem to be, for the most part, succumbing to the COVID virus. So how do you interpolate that into your decisions as to what you're going to do? And I don't know the answer to that. And that's a raging argument. I wish I did, but we're trying to do the best we can by listening to the experts, but also the people whose money is on the line. When you've made an investment, you're paying the lease on a building for a restaurant. Those people in hospitality, that's their whole lives are involved in that. How you design it, what you want to put out on the menu, how you're going to bring people in. And then we tell them you can't open up today. It's heartbreaking. So that's the best I can do on that one.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Many companies hesitated reopening quickly, even when they were able to. There were fears that they did not understand how to safely do so. Provinces individually developed reopening guidelines, and potentially across the country, there were vastly different ways of doing so. We can look locally at a local company that apparently followed all the instructions laid out, yet caused an outbreak. I think federally, there could have been a lot more sharing of resources and reducing provincial barriers. What are your thoughts?
The provinces are getting off easy on this one. I heard a number this morning that there's about $6 billion with a B in Ontario of unspent federal government money. We remember when we put about $2 billion into education, which was none of our business, but we said it's under the province's authority. But we said there are issues. We're going to put $2 billion in. The provinces can use that money as wisely for however they think it can help the situation. You didn't hear anything back about that. What I would agree with in the question is there is no clarity there. It's very confusing. You wear a mask, do you not wear a mask? What does social distancing mean? And so on. We've seen, for instance, the one that got me, I think, was the very large numbers that occurred in Ontario and all across Canada, especially around here, post-Thanksgiving. Because that seemed to indicate that people were having larger crowds than normal. The most people I've had in my house is 3 in the last several months. And I have visited very close relatives, and the most they've ever had in their house with my wife and I is 4. And we are close relatives. I don't think that was the case for a lot of people. So a lot of this, I hate to say it, is going to fall on the behavior of the public as to listening. Figure it out for yourself. You know, I've been in grocery stores where people are bumping into me with no mask and they're, you know, moving around getting things. And I'm not going to start a fight in a grocery store with somebody about a mask. It just doesn't work.
Right.
Especially for me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This pandemic has exposed many fundamental gaps in our society. Parents have had unprecedented instances of choosing between their careers and taking care of their children. Can you please give a couple examples how the government is planning on addressing these?
So the issue of childcare is crucial. On the other hand, the wage subsidy has been reduced on the basis of information that we received from employers who felt that it was difficult for some of their employees to come back, not on the wage subsidy, but on the amount of money that they were able to get on CERB and so on. So that money has been adjusted. So it becomes a difficult decision because there is not adequate childcare spaces. There's no question about that. It's a discussion that's undertaken right now in the government. How do we deal with that? That also goes once again into provincial legislation. Should we have more childcare opportunities within companies? That was a discussion we had. I remember we had that, like, 15 years ago, whether toddlers should be coming to work with their parents or their mother or so on. And we've seen some examples of that, very few in the House of Commons itself. There are family-friendly rooms now, for instance, in government. I have to say quickly, government is not family-friendly. When we're filibustering for 30 hours straight, it's not a place for families to be. Or some of the comments that are made. So yes, it's under discussion. There's no simple answer to it, and we have to resolve it in partnership with the provinces.
Thank you. Among the hardest hit demographic have been women, as industries such as hospitality, service, and travel heavily employ women. Additionally, some of these sectors continue to be significantly impacted. What specific sectoral help is expected to help these industries bounce back?
Well, it's an interesting sequence from your previous comment, because there are a lot of women, for instance, who can have a hospitality job and still look after their kids, because depending on the hours that they go in and so on, and those jobs are basically in many cases almost completely eliminated. The other piece of that, and I don't want to lose the thought since you brought it up, is the hospitality industry is the first employer for so many young people. It's often the first job that they get. And it's a great job in terms of learning about cash, learning about humanity, like learning how people behave in public, and dining and dashing and things like that. So there are no complete answers. What we need to do is hope that between now and June, let's say, and this seems to be the time frame that we're working on, is that the subsequent answers to the pandemic, which means vaccines and public's greater awareness of how they should behave with masks and social distancing will bring us to a point where we can have a much more open society and solve those problems that way. Because there are places in the world, even China, believe it or not, I saw a feature on Shanghai where it's completely open, and that's where it all began. So, and other places in the world, in New Zealand and so on. So what our real answer is to get back to close to normal.
Right. Okay. So naturally, with all the government programs to help citizens and businesses, there's been a great concern with Canada's rising debt. There's a fear that this pandemic will impact Canada's debt levels for many years. In the throne speech, it was announced that there will be a fiscal update in the fall. What are your thoughts on the path back to balancing the books, reinvigorating and kicking the economy into gear?
Well, me personally, I always ran on the immigrants' road to economic success, which is live within your means, do as much as you can for yourself, and make the most of what you have. You can't, of course, apply that in the broadest way to a national economy, but there are lots of things in there, including living within your means. There's no question that we are going to be in a difficult situation with regard to the debt load. The good news on that front is that all of the measurables show that we're in a good situation as far as a G7 country to accommodate that debt load right now, especially in view of the fact that interest rates continue to be low. Will that change? How will that change? What will the factors that come into that? And that's one of the reasons you look at the American election, you look at relationships with China. There's so many factors in the world that lend into the whole discussion of where the debt load's going. So I think that all I can say to our folks now is that we are in a good situation to ride this one out, given low interest rates and the possibility of a greater opening up of the economy over the next 6 months.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We've heard periodically of small businesses trying to hire back former staff or hire new staff, and they're having difficulties of getting staff hired. Their input is that some people are opting to stay at home and collect the government funds instead of returning to work. Any comments on this?
It's a discussion that I've heard many times, and it's not an easy one either, because one of the things that all of us, I'm sure, have noticed as we go around, people are home from the pandemic, they're out with their kids. They're having bike rides, they're walking around in the park. Halloween wasn't a great thing, but we did have, about 70 families come by our home the other day. It must be difficult for a parent and for their children, especially preschool, to suddenly, or the dog, to realize that that person's not going to be here like he or she was for the past several months. And it must weigh on people's minds. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and it lends into the discussion of universal basic income. What is the amount of money that people need to happily, or maybe not happily, but satisfactorily survive? And is that a solution to this? And so there's a lot of good work being done on that. And I can tell you that it's not lost on the government. We're not certainly going to make an announcement in the next few weeks about basic income, but I can tell you that that has to come into the discussion about how people behave, how you get them back to work, and whether or not we're giving people too much money to even consider going back to work, because that's the basis of that question is, well, why should they come and work for me for close to a minimum wage when you're almost giving them the same money? And that's the answer to that question is being worked on.
Okay, thank you. Many businesses have had to change their operation models, for example, such as digitizing more. As we emerge from this pandemic, what do you think we can do to encourage businesses to be more innovative?
I don't know how you can survive in business in this day and age without being innovative. It's interesting because we look at the steel industry, and you often hear things like the Rust Belt. You can't survive in the modern steel industry, and we're seeing steel mills in the United States closing down because they're old, rusty, falling down mills. ArcelorMittal has put in hundreds of millions of dollars in upgrading, and they're continuing to upgrade. Stelco is spending about $200 million in an upgrade on their blast furnace at Lake Erie. So big industry knows it, smaller industry knows it, and there is a great deal of innovation that's going on. However, one of the industries in Hamilton East Stony Creek employs a lot of females who make around minimum wage, but also can make extra money through the volume of work that they do. Piecework is what we call it. So that individual's point is that if the cost of his employee costs go too high, then he may bring innovation into his workplace, which would result in, in other words, robotics, automation, etc., which may cost those jobs. So he's weighing those two things in terms of the question that you asked. So, but nevertheless, we have to get on board. Like, look at how Zoom meetings, as much as I despise some of this technology because it let me down big time yesterday. I was supposed to make a speech in the House, and the whole thing just disappeared. But we can scramble a meeting together in very short order in a way that we never could before.
Right. Okay. So speaking about digitization, access to the internet is quite limited in some rural areas. Reliable and affordable internet remains a distant thought to many. What are your thoughts to enhance and strengthen these systems to create a competitive landscape for all?
The federal government has put in millions of dollars in the previous and current parliament trying to address that problem. I hate to tell you this, but in my own office in downtown Stony Creek, we've got all sorts of enhanced equipment here to try to solve that very problem because the service is not good. And that's not to mention, remote places, but there are plenty of urban centers where there's a problem with connectivity as well. I think the real answer may lie in what I'm hearing from Elon Musk, who wants to put all these rockets up and put hundreds and hundreds of satellites up to blanket the whole world so that everybody in the remotest corners of the world can get a signal. On the other hand, it spoils the sky. There's not a simple answer to that one yet that we figured out. But the government is working hard to solve that, and we have spent significant amount of money on it. I think we're a long way from the solution, and it probably is going to require some great innovators such as Elon Musk to really make a country like Canada. I mean, look at us on the map. How do you make sure that no matter where you go in that second largest country in the world, that you've got a signal?
Right. Okay. So I have 3 questions regarding the United States. First one, do we anticipate at this time when the border will potentially be open?
No anticipation. I think November is the last notification that we've received. And I'm not sure the Americans are willing to travel very much either, for the opposite reason of bringing stuff back because they got enough problems within the range. But it's a difficult problem, and it's easier for us to say we don't want people bringing COVID here, but we also want the tourist money.
Right. Okay. Next U.S. question. The past couple of years have been tough on Canada to defend our interests, such as the steel and aluminum tariffs. What kind of shifting lateral relationship do you see with us having with the U.S. after their presidential election? And of course, we don't really know who's the president yet, but Just seeing what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I don't think it matters whose wins because Fortress America seems to have emerged from this the past campaign, and we've heard from both sides hardening of positions in terms of that. Buy America, America first, you name it. The sad part of that is that our economies are so heavily integrated that it's going to hurt everybody, because there are products that are easily made. I can tell you about the steel industry, for instance. The quality of steel that comes out of ArcelorMittal can't suddenly be replicated by an old steel mill in Gary, Indiana. That steel mill will have to decide, you know, it's going to take us $400 or $500 million investment to bring the quality up to what they have there. And even if we do that, can we be guaranteed that we're going to get the contracts for the next 2 or 3 years to start to get to pay back our investment? So it's not that easy. And then there was the aluminum thing, which was just ridiculous, because I think there was one producer who had Trump's ear in the United States who brought on that whole renewal of the aluminum tariffs. So I think in the short term, a lot of things are going to be said, but in the long term, and that's why I think the Prime Minister wants us to be very careful about the things that we say. We'll continue to work on relationships and make sure that everybody understands that what's good for the United States is good for Canada and Mexico and vice.
Okay, perfect. So our last US question, as Canada is the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with each of those countries, do you see our trade relationships expanding to ensure our global competitiveness and to ensure a robust supply chain?
Well, any questions about the global competitiveness and supply chain cannot avoid the conversation about China. You have 1.3 or more billion people. You have about at least the population of the United States, or maybe more, probably 400 to 500 million people out of that billion plus, who are living in a first world quality of life. They're a big market. Look at the, the Canadian coats that we're trying to sell. I think it's the real conversation that needs to be had, which is being had and which is going on now, and you never resolve things in the media or by broad statements about what we're going to do if this happens or that happens. You work quietly and diplomatically behind the scenes to resolve it. And we have to resolve that with China, and I would say maybe Russia too, because of the resources that they have in the natural gas, the oil, and some of the rare earths, and so on. It all builds into the global supply chain, and we can't just simply pick and choose where we're going to try to open up a market. We need everybody.
Okay. So our last prepared question today, as we are seeing some increases in case numbers and have a bit of a gloom in the short term, however, looking ahead 5 years, what do you see for businesses?
I'm really an optimist. At my age, I've lived through a lot. And I can recall, for instance, when I was dating, young people were not wanting to really consider having families. What's the point of having a child when there's going to be an atomic war, nuclear bombs, and civil defense warnings were coming up, and there were pictures of the bombers coming, and we were all scared of them. I was terrified, but it was on my mind. How many recessions have we been through? 1957, 1980, 81. Remember the interest rates that went up to 17%? I saw in 1965 in Stratford, I saw people lined up at the British Mortgage and Trust office in Stratford because their whole life savings were being wiped out because of the collapse of the Atlantic Acceptance Corporation. been through it. And I think that's why these people are 100 years old and they got that little smile on their face. Well, don't worry, be happy, and make your wife happy, and you'll be happy, kind of thing. I'm always positive because I've been through a lot, and boy, we're
we lost you. Are you there now? Yep, you're there.
Bratina?
Go ahead, Bob. Yes.
I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to wrap up this question period on a positive note. I would like to comment that covering the extra costs because of the pandemic's been extremely tough on some business owners, of course. I will mention that Mohawk College Enterprise was named as one of the 62 recipients Canada-wide who received a $10,000 grant from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and Salesforce Canada. And this was in the summertime. So that was a very coveted award and very helpful to them as well to keep going. There was a newer fund available called the Canada United Small Business Relief Fund, where companies could use the grant to cover costs of PPE, make physical modifications to their businesses. The federal government recently contributed $12 million to this fund. So in total, $14 million was in the fund. The quota to receive the applications was received so quickly, and they've already shut it down. So it definitely shows the need for such a program. So I'm really hoping that we do continue to see these dedicated help programs come out. So if anyone has any specific questions, I can address those now. So I don't see any hands raised, but are there any questions from the group? I just want to make sure that if anyone has any to ask Bob.
Patty, hi, this is Ralph. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ralph.
Yep.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
How was everybody? I'm sorry, I apologize. I got in late. We were having some computer issues, and I have to admit that I have a brand new iPhone, and it's been very difficult for me converting from a BlackBerry to an iPhone. And then I realized I can get on my iPhone and at least get into this conference today. So I apologize for my lateness, Mr. Bratina. I just want to say on behalf of the Stony Creek Chamber of Commerce and all our members, and me on a personal note, I want to thank you for all your hard work and what you're doing. It's always a pleasure to listen to you speak. You're very insightful, and you speak about things from your heart, and you give us an example of that positive spirit that we all need right now. So I want to thank you very much for your comments today and helping us, make a little sense of where we are, where we're going, and what we need to do to get through these really unprecedented times. So thank you very much, Mr. Bratina. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate your remarks. Thank you very much. We don't always get accolades, as you know.
Thank you. So that was Ralph Vitello.
Well,
Ralph is our president of the chamber.
Yeah, of course, Ralph. Thank you.
Patty.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Patty, could I ask a
Thank you.
question?
Thank you. Absolutely. Pat Campbell, he's on our board as well. Go ahead,
Yep.
Pat.
Morning, Mr. Bratina. How are you, sir? Good. Just a quick question, sir. We keep hearing so much about climate change, and actually, I've got a great niece, and she was over one day talking, and amazing what these young people know about climate change. Do you think it's as big an issue as they say, or do you have any comments on the type of situation that we're facing in the future years? Because it looks like climate change is causing an awful lot of issues now. They say that pandemics are possibly going to be occurring more often than normal and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that it's a very valid question about climate change. And there's a lot of discussion among scientists too about what's happening and why it's happening. And of course, climate change over the millennia wiped out civilizations in the past. The Dorset, I remember I've done a lot of work on the Arctic because I'm the chair of the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee. And there was an Inuit population that was wiped out by a warming, 10,000 years ago kind of thing. So there is a cycle. Currently, we're concerned about man's human activity affecting the climate. That's why, we're going through the discussions that we're having. One of the questions that somebody posed to me once was, how do we know what the best world global temperature is? If it goes up by 1 or 2 degrees, what does that take everything into account? And the water goes up and this and that. I'll tell you something this week that happened to me. I bought Melissa, the wine consultant at the LCBO, happened to be standing there, and I said, well, give me something. And she said, well, this one's very good. So I took it home and I looked at it, and it was a wine from Grey County. It's just south of Owen Sound. Now, 20 years ago, you would never think that they were going to be growing wine grapes in Owen Sound. I mean, they could grow them, but it wouldn't be any good. So extrapolating from that a larger picture, will we have, for instance, in Churchill, Manitoba, wheat fields? I don't know. We're seeing, of course, the Greenland is being exposed because the ice is retreating. And so more land is appearing. What happens on that land? And I'm sounding like a climate change denier right now, and I'm not. We need to get a hold of all of the terrible things that have been happening that we have been doing to the climate. But we also have to have a fuller understanding of how the whole thing works. And so I would say, I wish that our young people weren't so very afraid of what the future is bringing. I think we're putting so much neurosis on very young people about everything that it takes the fun out of growing up. Look at Halloween, for instance. You can't go out, you might get a cold. And true, we had to do that. But in the case, Patrick, that you mentioned, I think there's a lot of more knowledge that needs to be retained to make sure that we're moving absolutely in the right direction. Because look at Norway, they're going to be fossil-free by 2030 or something like that, and they're drilling for oil in the Arctic basin. Which oil they're going to sell to us? You see what I mean? There's a lot of games being played on this whole front. So and we're a small country depending on resources, so we have to make decisions that will help us survive as a country, in addition to taking into account the things that we do to upset the climate balance.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from the group? I think we're good. Okay. Bob, I'd like to thank you again for spending this time with our Stony Creek Chamber membership and sharing your expertise and optimism. And thank you again to McHugh Whitmore, BDC, Meridian Credit Union, and TerraPure for their sponsorship of today's event. Again, for further information on COVID-19 business particulars, visit chamberstonycreek.com. Click on the yellow box, COVID-19, vital information. And now more than ever, the Stony Creek Chamber is here to be your voice, represent your businesses, help sustain our businesses, and be a part of the robust plan for recovery. We are in this together. Next week, we will be hosting Mayor Fred Eisenberger on Tuesday at 12 o'clock. So if you've not signed up, please email Connie here at the office and book your spot. And thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
And before everybody hangs up, I want to give you a fact.
Yes.
Okay, because
we like facts.
all right, okay. Because the questions came up, and it's hard for me to pull the numbers out of the air, but I have them in my fingers right now. The Canada Emergency Business Account is being increased from $40,000 to 60,000. You're aware of that account, the 40,000 that you can borrow, and that's going to 60,000. And to date, the CEBA has been accessed by 778,211 businesses for a total of $31.13 billion. So there's a lot of good things happening out there. And once again, thank you for your time. Great to see everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You too, Patty.
Take care, Patty.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.
care,
Take care.
everyone.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Mr. Bratina.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Nice to
Bye-bye.
see everybody. Bye.
Nice to
Bye.
see you, Judy. Take care.